There we go. Hello, world. This is Nick Jarman, and you are listening to the Leadership Podcast. Today, it is my pleasure to have as a guest Mr. Matt Carlucci. Mr. Matt Carlucci Sr. has owned the Matt Carlucci Sr. Insurance Agency for over 30 years. He has served 3 terms on the City Council with the City of Jacksonville, once including as president. And he was just recently named the 2019 Folio Person of the Year in the entire City of Jacksonville. So Matt, good morning and thank you for joining the show.
Okay, well, I'm pleasure to be with you, Nick, and it's amazing how you can do this from Missouri or where are you in Kansas? Is that where St. Louis at? It's in Missouri, isn't it?
We're in the Missouri side.
Yeah, okay.
I know Trump gets that confused sometimes, but we'll forgive him.
Yeah, well, sure, I can forgive anybody.
All right, so we'll jump into it. And the first question that I have for you, Mr. Carlucci, is if you had to choose one person in your life that has had the greatest influence on you in regards to leadership, who would that be and why?
Well, I would have to say my father, but he passed away so many years ago. There's been other people that have filled his shoes over the years for me. But my father, as a young man, my father was an action-oriented guy, and that's what you got to have if you're going to be in leadership. You got to be action-oriented. You can't be shy and be a leader, and you have to think before you speak. But sometimes being a leader means being able to speak quickly before you think too hard, but you know you're saying the right thing because it's bubbling up from your core or your soul. And so that means you got to know who you are on the inside, know what you stand for, know what you believe in, know what your values are. That's a big part of leadership right there. And another thing that's helped in leadership is having the right people around you, the best people around you. And so I was very lucky in our recent campaign, which has put me in my 4th term on the council. Your mama, boy, she was so dedicated to our campaign, to what we believed in, to what our core values were. And I just can never thank her enough. It's just impossible. So if you're on there, thank you, Melinda. But it's about having really good people around you, because we all don't have the answer. And so, having people around you that can help counsel. I mean, even the Bible in the Old Testament says, to surround yourself with I don't know how the exact scripture goes. I should know about scripture better, I reckon, but to surround yourself with wise counsel, and that'll help you make a better decision. Now, you don't want to surround yourself with people that are so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good. You want people that they got some heavenly values, but they also understand the real world. And that may sound like a dichotomy, but we live in a real world with people that are totally different from, who we may be used to being around. And when you are on the city council, you have to learn to represent everybody. You have to kind of, as the Romans said, when you're in Rome, do as the Romans do, Mm-hmm. And so, my father, first and foremost, was most influential in my life. He said 2 things that I'll never forget. He said a lot of things I'll never forget, but I'll tell you 2. He said, when you are in leadership, and particularly in politics, that a politician looks to the next election, but a statesman looks to the next election. And I can tell you, here in Jacksonville, there's people already lining up to run for mayor, and they're trying to get all their ducks in a row, and they're still in office. I'm like, come on, you've got a job ahead of you. Right. It's not many, but it's and I see people in other leadership posts, probably more in different leadership posts than on the council, that are wanting to run for mayor. And and they just, you know, all they can think about is the next election, and that's a recipe for disaster.
So
And the other thing he told me, let me tell you one other thing he told me, which was quite profound. I was about 18, 19 years old. We were driving down an expressway here in Jacksonville in his little Jeep. And I was telling my father about how much I loved history. And he says, you know, son, and my father was in politics at the time too. This is like 37 years ago. And he said, I love history too, but I'd rather make it. Okay. So that's what leadership can help you do, is make history. And
I like that. I like that. So I talked to a lot of people about leadership, and you hit on a point about being action oriented. And one thing, and I kind of align that with execution. What would you describe as one of the reasons why people tend to not act on what they want to do or their ideas, and instead let things just kind of go by? What would you say is the difference between the idea and then the execution of the idea? Why do you think people are afraid? Like you wanted to be in politics, but you didn't just want to be in there, you acted on it. Why do you think some people don't act on it?
Because they don't know who they really are inside. They just want the attention that sometimes being in public service brings. They're ambitious, and let me tell you, a lot of times younger people, I include myself when I was younger, I didn't know all about who I was at the time, because I was younger. I was just barely turned 30. By the way, my wife just sent me gave me a note. I said next. What did she say? Well, anyway, let me make sure I got this saying clear. My father said that you politicians look to the next election, statesmen look to the next generation.
Okay.
And that's what gives you the core action-oriented personality, is if you really believe in that, if you really want to make a difference for your children and your children's children, you can't do it sitting on the couch watching TV. You gotta, in some form or fashion, be it politics or not-for-profit, a historical society or whatever, you get involved, Chamber of Commerce, you get involved, and when you're young, it's best to kind of get started by doing the little things, because if you get the little things done in the form of excellence, and that's what we should all strive for, is excellent, not good, not great, but excellent. And when we strive for excellence, even in the small things, you'll be rewarded with bigger things to take on for your community or for the association you're working with. But my compass always points towards the next generation. Everything I do points to the next generation. And that was the first maxim I remember my dad saying when I was probably 8 or 9 years old.
Very nice. I'm gonna have to use that quote.
It's not his quote, somebody's quote, but my dad used it.
Somebody got it.
Yeah.
So in life, we all suffer setbacks. We all have setbacks. Some deem them failures, others deem them learning opportunities. Is there one setback that you can think back to that you learned the most from and served as kind of a catalyst to something new that kind of helped you go from where you were to the next part of where you wanted to be?
Well, I've run for office 6 times, and twice I lost. Once trying to go for the Florida Senate, and the other time for mayor. And so right after I had run for the Florida Senate, that's a multi-county race, but I was not in the right party at the time for that area, but I thought I could win it, and I lost. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because setbacks and failures, as the previous owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars told me one time, is like fertilizer. Failure is like fertilizer. It helps you to grow. So, you get a setback. It's okay to lick your wounds for a little while, but then you got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and go back to, what did I learn from that failure? And what I learned from that failure was running for the Florida Senate was I really didn't care for the issues, and so I had no real passion in me. And I should have, if I'd have been older, I probably would have recognized that by then. And I also learned that it's so important to put really good people around you, and I had good people around me, but I didn't have the right people, and I didn't really have some that would have been best for that particular seat. And then when I lost that race 5 years later, there came a council seat open. Business leaders came and said, "Would you run for this seat? The guy that's in there now is not doing a good job," and so on and so forth. So I said, "Sure, I'd love to go back to the council, because on the city council, we represent the whole city and county and city, because we're a consolidated government. So we have 864.3 square miles of Jacksonville. We don't have a county commission, and we don't have several city councils. We have one big city council, except for the Atlantic Beach, Neptune Beach, and Jacksonville Beach, and then the little town of Baldwin. But basically, a lot of counties our size may have 7, 8, 9, 10 cities inside it. We just have one city council of 19 people. So you can really make a big difference on your community if you serve on the council." So I said, "Sure, I'll run again." And I ran, and I against 2 or 3 people, and I won it in the first ballot, and that gave me new life. And I had a great time, because I started out as the finance chair, and which is the best chairmanship to get, really, that and rules. I became vice president of the council the next year, then I became president of the next council after that. And then in my 4th year, I decided to throw my hat in the ring for mayor, and we got in late. We raised a bunch of money, and but I missed it by that much. So I learned a lot from that race as well. And what I learned from that is timing is everything. And that race probably was not the best timing for me, because I still had my kids at home, and you got to be able to raise your kids, and it could have jeopardized my career, actually. So, whether people are in a place of understanding or believing in God, believing in Christ, or whatever faith that you might be, but I found that living that God always has a reason for whatever happens to you. So 17 years later, I run for the council again, and we won with like 72% of the vote. And it was a real mandate, and I've really enjoyed working on the council with my colleagues, and we're doing some good things for Jacksonville. The mayor and I have developed a good relationship, and so things are good. I'm enjoying life. I'm a little not as young as I used to be, let's put it that way. And so it's not as easy as it used to be, but I still have the same fire. But perhaps my fire has been tempered by a little bit of wisdom. There's a saying that Churchill said when he got to be an old man and became prime minister, "When youth departs, may wisdom be enough." And at my age, you hope you've gotten enough wisdom in your life to do the right thing at the right time and make the best choices, because there's a lot of competing choices out there in whatever realm of leadership that you're in. And you got to make sure somehow you find the right choice. And that's done with a whole lot of study and a thoughtful prayer.
Well, I know on behalf of myself, a lot of friends and family still down there in Jacksonville, they know you're doing a great job, and keep it up on that angle. Well, so I got a question, and this is let's think pre-COVID-19, if we can get back to before March. Before March, what would you say that were the biggest challenges that leaders were facing today?
Well, in Jacksonville, I can speak on the local level. In Jacksonville, we were trying to get a half penny sales tax on the ballot in coming this November for a half penny sales tax to repair our schools. And I worked very hard to get that on the ballot, and we came up short. That was very frustrating to me, to the city. And the other issue was the then leadership of much of the community, politically and on the and with the Jacksonville Electric Authority, or the JEA, wanted to sell JEA. JEA, our electric authority, also handles our water. It is our cash cow. It is a stable pipeline of stream of dollars that they contribute to our general fund. It would have been foolhardy to turn our water over to some private utility and to privatize that utility, and I fought that very hard. And we did, and we won. And then the next challenge was trying to find a way to build a relationship with our mayor. And the mayor and I finally had a nice sit-down talk, and our I wouldn't say we're great friends. I would say that we're both friendly to each other. You know, friends is defined differently amongst people. We don't go to dinner with the mayor. We don't spend weekends with the mayor. That's not that kind of friendship. But when we're talking about city government, we're both more together since the JEA failed. And I think a lot of people learned a lot after that debacle. It was a debacle, but nonetheless, that was our pre-COVID issue. And just before March is when I began to develop a relation with the mayor. And the way I did it was I just reached out to him, because I could tell he had a pretty rough go of it. And just as I've told you, I've lost 2 elections. I know what it's like to be hurt politically, to be slid over to the gutter politically. And I also know what it's like when somebody reaches down and helps pick you up and give you a second chance,
Right.
Or maybe even a third chance. So that's where we were in Jacksonville. Nationally, it's just one drama after another. And I won't go into national politics, except that, everything's so divided up. I really, Benjamin Franklin was asked, was he a Republican or Democrat or something along that line back in the day. I don't think there was Republicans back then, may not have been Democrats, but there are factions. And he said, I am an extreme moderate. Okay. So that's what I am. I'm an extreme moderate. I see things on the right. I see things on the left. And if I think they're good for Jacksonville, I'm going to grab hold of it and try to do something with it.
If I asked you for one piece of advice that you would give me if I was going into a leadership role for the first time, just at a local company down the street, what would that one piece of advice be?
Okay, going to work for a big corporation or something like that?
Big corporation, little corporation. I'm just going into the workforce, and I'm just now going into a leadership role. One piece of advice.
I would do a lot of reading. I think reading presidential autobiographies is a great, or biographies is a great way to learn how our great leaders have acted. I also think it is, in the business world, it's essential that you know how to build relationships with people. If you can't build friendships and relationships very easy, you're probably not meant to go into leadership. And then you got to listen to those that are around you that you're expected to lead. You need to hear what they have to say. You have to be interested in their lives. You have to be interested in their goals, so that your job of leadership, the better job you do, if it helps better the lives of the people that you've been put in charge with, then it'll help you have a better life as well. But you can't march in there and just expect everybody to do everything that you think is right. And again, I say this: surround yourself with a smart group of people, so when you have difficult decisions to make, in that leadership role, you get some good, honest feedback. And that also means listening to that good, honest feedback. Don't listen to them and then not listen. And don't hear them. I guess what I'm saying is, don't waste their time by ignoring their advice. Now, that doesn't mean their advice is always going to be right, but it will help you develop into a better leader if you are teachable. You've got to be teachable. If you're not teachable, then you better go down the street and find another job, because you won't last long if you're not teachable and if you don't care about your fellow employees.
Gotcha. So looking back at your career, and now you're in a place where you have a lot of wisdom that you can impart to the younger generation. Are there any questions that it doesn't even have to be leaders, it can just be individuals. Are there any questions that you found yourself asking yourself back then, or questions that you would have individuals ask themselves now as they kind of take self-inventory about who they are and what their bigger purpose is?
Well, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. I apologize, Nick.
So I think maybe a little bit of context. So as we grow older, so as we grow up through life, we start to get conditioned sometimes that asking questions isn't always the right thing. As we get older, it's not now, just hold on, wait for that question. As we get to school, we'll get to you later. And so we get conditioned to not ask questions. Mm-hmm. And then as we're not asking questions, we then subconsciously stop learning. Right. So looking back, now that we understand it is important to ask questions, it is important to learn, I'm just wondering if there's any type of questions that you might ask yourself when you're facing a major issue, when you're facing a big decision. Do you do any type of internal self-check?
I do. I try to ask myself, how would I feel if I was in the other person's shoes that my decision might affect? I always question myself internally. Have I listened to what they're saying enough? Do I fully understand from where they're coming from? And Lord, help me not to be so stubborn that I think I know it all. I'm 64. I darn sure don't know it all. And so I still try to surround myself with people that are smart and that can help me make a good decision. But the older you get, you do learn from your lessons if you allow yourself to learn from lessons. But some people have a fear of failure, and you can't fear failure. So I was never, I never had a fear of failure. I didn't want to fail ever, but I recognized that some of our greatest leaders had great failures in their life. My gosh, Harry Truman had failures. Abraham Lincoln had failures. General Eisenhower had failures. So it's your ability and your resilience that helps you get back up and say, what did I do wrong that I could have done better? So when I'm making decisions about things, I'm trying to look at the big picture, not trying to force my beliefs on others, but sometimes maybe helping my beliefs give me the inspiration on knowing that I'm 64. Now I'm finding myself thinking, okay, I don't want to be thinking like a 64-year-old guy all the time. I want to try to make myself think like a 25-year-old, 30-year-old. I don't want to be outdated. Okay. Right. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah. I just think we all have to look back as leaders and realize we don't know it all, and we can always learn, and we should always be learning. And I wish I had started reading. I grew a great passion for reading right after I lost that race for the Florida Senate. I wish I had started reading way before then, because I've learned so much from reading. And I don't like fiction's okay to read, for enjoyment. But I like nonfiction. I like real life. And I try to choose my books by who the author is. I want to make sure the author is the real deal, not somebody from a cable channel that's trying to perpetrate his particular or her particular ideals on me. I want to listen to somebody that has the ability to question themselves. We should all never stop learning to question ourselves. Is what I'm doing right? Is what I'm doing going to cause a ripple effect on other people in a harmful way? Don't want to do that.
Agreed. And I love the saying that leaders are learners, because once you think that you know it all, it's time to go find another profession.
Yep. And leaders are readers.
Yep.
And if you look at our great presidents in the country, particularly the founding fathers, they were great readers. Every one of them were. Harry Truman was a great leader. I mean, he was a great leader, but he was a great reader. So anyway.
Perfect. No, that answers the question. So when it comes to values that, and we'll just use the values that you look for in other people that demonstrate kind of great leadership abilities, what are some of the strong values that you think other people need to have in order to demonstrate great leadership?
Are they capable of telling the truth even if it hurts themselves? Okay. Are they capable of putting themselves in other people's shoes? Repeat that question one more time for this old guy.
Just as far as what values do you find most important in a leader?
And the other value that I look for is, are they open-minded? Because if they're going to come talk to me and they're closed-minded and they're, sometimes this happens, people won't believe the way that you do, and yet they'll try to strike up a conversation with you, and they're yelling so much that it's impossible to have a conversation. If we're going to have a conversation, it means both people have to be open to the other person's ideas and how they believe and why they believe. If I don't respect what Nick Jarman says, first of all, that's not going to incline you to want to ask me any more questions. And if I'm not interested in hearing what you say, and I'm not open to what Nick Jarman says, then I'm in big trouble, because remember, I'm running to help future generations, you, and not to live like I do, but to live in the new ways that you're learning how to live and the values that you have, and helping those, your values, to blend into my values, hopefully, if they can, and to make decisions like that. But values are very important in life, period, whether it's being a parent, whether it's being a leader of any organization, or in politics. And in politics too, it's one of the greatest places to be misunderstood, because you may vote a certain way on an issue and people might get upset with you, but maybe they came to me with an open mind and heard exactly why I voted the way that I did. They may not agree with me, but I think they'd walk away saying, well, he voted his convictions after listening to different points of view.
Agreed, completely. So one thing that I think we might all agree on is that the only thing consistent in this world is inconsistency. So from one day to the next, there's going to be a lot of inconsistency. What type of wisdom could you impart on people to manage through change? Things change, it's inevitable. We don't control nearly what we would like to think we can control. What type of advice would you have for people to manage through change?
To change. There's a great saying, I don't think Churchill said this, but he said it, he used it one time in life, and that was people who never change their minds never change anything. Okay, and so we have to embrace change, and the older that we become, the harder it is, because of technology. We didn't grow up with the new technology that we have today, but but I embrace it, or I grab a fourth grader and ask him how to fix it. But if we're not willing to change, if we're not willing to be open-minded to better ways and better ways of thinking, then we're not going to be really productive citizens. And I see that a lot today, and it bothers me in the realm of particularly politics. People become so dogmatic. They have such dogmas that that dogma almost builds a fence around them to the point where they can't see what's over the other side of the damn fence.
Right.
You got to be able to see what's over the other side, and don't live in a bubble. Get outside and see what other people are thinking, and especially younger people. If you are in leadership of some sort. So how old are you now, Nick?
40 years old.
Lord have mercy. That's hard to believe. Well, you as a 40-year-old need to understand how the 20 and 30-year-old young people are. I'll tell you, we're having in this country, I believe, hold on just for a second. Hey, I'm in a meeting, guys. My grandkids are having fun on the weekend.
No worries.
So there's a movement, and some people don't like to call it a movement, and that's usually old people stuck in the mud. But there is a movement amongst people that are like your age and younger. When that police officer held that Mr. Floyd down and literally killed him with his knee on his neck. That sparked marches here in Jacksonville, peaceful marches. And you know what? It was mostly made up of young white professionals and young white couples. And they were marching with their children sometimes in their carriage. Things are changing now. And a lot of people don't like that change. Well, you know what? Change is coming. So you can either wallow in your self-righteousness, or you can open your mind to the future. And these younger people are trying to tell people of my generation something that's important to them, which is to embrace everybody. Don't be exclusive, be inclusive. And they're trying to send that message to people my age. And I think we had better listen. And I do listen. So that's been an interesting phenomenon in Jacksonville. And it's a good movement. I hope we don't lose it. But when a movement happens, it can either go too far or not far enough. And right now we seem to have a good balance here in Jacksonville with the majority of people thinking alike about, and even changing their minds on issues. Down in the deep South here, listen, we had a Confederate soldier in Hemming Park since 1880 something, and nobody wanted, none of the folks my age or my color, wanted that statue to come down, but it eventually did come down. And it came down because of the movement that started with Mr. Floyd's death. I think that's his last name. Yeah. And the pressure came from young white people. That tells me a lot about how this country is changing, and changing for the better. And there's one thing I don't like. I have little tolerance for people that have little tolerance. Okay? I try to be tolerant of everybody, because I want people to be tolerant of me. And so I want to be tolerant of other people to the best that I can. But if somebody's intolerant, not willing to accept other people for race or whatever, then they're not being fair. They need to go read the Declaration of Independence again. And the Constitution.
We're seeing the same thing here in the St. Louis area, and I think you're right. There's a difference between a movement and a moment. And I think, we're seeing the precipice of a movement. And so it's just a matter of keeping that on. Well,
Yep.
and that kind of leads into the next part. And that is that anything in life that is worthwhile is difficult to obtain. If something was easy, then everybody would do it. And that's the same thing holds true with leadership. If leadership was easy, then we'd have a bunch of everybody would be a leader, and it would be, vice versa. But what do you find is the most difficult part of being a leader? And like, how do you go and recognize if you were to look at a group of 10 people to try to spot, hey, that's a leader or that's not a leader? Like, just based on how would you evaluate a leader from not a leader?
I evaluate leaders after getting to know them a bit on their leadership style. Is their leadership style inclusive of everybody, or is it exclusive? Are they willing to realize that maybe they don't have the best idea, somebody else can improve upon their idea? Then they're a leader. If they think they have the best idea and they're not willing to listen to others, they're not a leader. Leaders are people that help bring out the best in other people, and the only way to do that is to put your own self aside. And so, like on the council, one of the best ways that I can lead is by helping my other colleagues accomplish what they want to accomplish. And if I do that and I help them, then they're going to try to help me. So I have a saying in Jacksonville here that when Jacksonville moves best when people move together. But if we're divided up over racial lines, sexual orientation lines, anything that divides our city is going to come to a screeching halt, and we're not going to get to where we want to get to. So leaders are also people that know how to bring people together and build bridges. If you can't bring people together who are different, then you're not going to be a good leader. And one other thing, a big part of leadership is helping people save their face. When I was a young politician, I was very idealistic. I had some dogmas in me, and somebody came to me and gave me some lessons about how to be more open. And that's another thing about having smart people around you and being able to listen. Kind of forgot where I was going with on that, Nick. But I guess at the end of the day, leaders have to realize that their actions affect other people. And so, think of your swimming pool being the glassy, no ripples in it at all. And a bad decision can be like taking a little pebble and throwing it into that pool. And it's not just the splash that is affecting people, but the ripples go out from that, and they affect this group, that group, this group, that group. So you must be purposeful, authentic, and open in your style of leadership to help people want to help you accomplish your goals.
So coming down to the last few questions, and I want to parlay off of your saying about Jacksonville and being forward and moving forward together. When you turn on the news, I don't even want to call it that anymore because it's more opinion pieces.
Yeah.
When you turn on the TV, there's so much division, and the only way to get where we want to be is unity. So where do you see that balance? How can other people go about making that change of drowning out the noise over here? What can we do You've mentioned about being authentic. You've mentioned some other things, but are there any other points that you would like to make about being together? How do you go about that on the council, bringing people together?
Well, if somebody disagrees with me, but I can find a nugget of truth in what they're saying, the first thing I do is reach to them about that nugget of truth and say, I like what you said about that. Let me add this. Don't use the but word. That's a bad word. I like what you did, but. So what you've done is you've just given them something and used the but word and taken it all back. So I like the way you're thinking on that. I'd like to add something, an idea that maybe can dovetail in with what you're saying. And suddenly that person's not embarrassed and they're going to be willing to listen to what you have to say. And so you have to find a way to help others, bring others along. And you can't do that by, insulting them or not being tolerant of them. But you can't bring people together on everything. But you can at least be civil about it. When people are not civil, those are deep lines of division that are very hard to bring together. And so we need to learn a lot of civility in our country, in our state, and in our cities today. And I guess that's true even if it's a business or a church or whatever. If you disagree with something, make sure you're open-minded, give your reason for the way you think, but give some wiggle room for the other person to believe the way they believe. And you know what? More times than not, they'll respect what you think, and you can walk away being able to say, well, we didn't agree, but we agreed to disagree, and in a civil manner. But in politics, you've got 20% on the right, 20% of the left, and they're so busy yelling at each other that the 60% in the middle, they're doing a job, doing a podcast and talking about leadership like you, paying their taxes, raising their children, and trying to lead productive lives. That 60% kind of gets drowned out by the fringes on both sides, 20 and 20, because those 20% on the right are arguing with the ones on the left, and those are people that their minds are so made up, they're in concrete, and therefore they'll turn on whatever news station they think will tell them, will buck up, their point of view, and they won't listen to the other point of view. And don't ever be that way. Don't ever anybody think they know it all. As soon as you think you know it all, you're going to find out real hard you don't know it all, and it's going to come down like a big foot on your head.
Right.
Or maybe a foot somewhere else, but go ahead.
So this is not really a question. This is kind of just to put a bow tie on all this and wrap it all together. Throughout your successful professional career, your great, personal life with wonderful wife, your kids, your grandkids, on the topic of the podcast with leadership, when you hear that word leadership and you associate it with Matt Carlucci Sr., what does it mean to you? What has it meant to you?
It means opportunity, an opportunity to help others. It means, going back to what my dad said, an opportunity to make history. I mean, maybe not history like Abraham Lincoln made history, but making history and helping make our little slice of the union a little more perfect. Okay? And when I think of leadership, I think of opportunities. I think of other people, and I think of bringing people together by listening to all sides. Never silence anybody's voice. Always be willing to listen, even if they're, I've had people in politics get right up in my face and scream to the top of their lungs how wrong I am about something. And I just say, well, I appreciate your opinion, and I'm not sure we're going to agree on this, but there may be other things we can agree on. And it's not always easy. That's when you're trying to listen to the fringes. But we'll never be perfect. There's only one perfect person who's lived in this world in my religious values, and may be different from other people in their religious values. But but just try every day to be a better person, and to understand where other people are coming from. Be open-minded. Don't be the last thing I want to be is an old 64-year-old gray-haired guy that thinks he knows it all and is not willing to listen to young people. I don't want to be like that in life. Do not want to be like that in life.
Right. All right. Well, everybody, I want to thank you for listening to this edition of the Nick Jarman Leadership Podcast. Special thank you to Mr. Matt Carlucci Sr. Mr. Carlucci, I can't say thank you enough for taking your time on this beautiful Saturday morning to do this.
Well, I can't tell you how proud I am of you enough, Nick. You're a really great young man. I miss you down here in Jacksonville. Your mama, she's a great leader. I don't know what we would have done without your mama in my campaign. So
I don't know what I'd have done without her either. I wouldn't be here to start. So
yeah, that's right. Well, don't forget your mama now. Don't forget your mama.
All right, Mr. Carlucci, have a great weekend. Enjoy those grandkids and tell everybody we said hello.
Okay. Thank you, my friend. Take care out there. Be safe.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.